Hi, everybody. John Haldi here with Haldi Tech, and I'm excited to have David Cooper back with me. David, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be back. Really enjoyed talking with you a couple times here doing these videos. It's good to get word out, and it's been a pleasant response from the community with it. So it's really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me again.
My pleasure. My pleasure. In fact, last couple times we were here, we talked about challenges and issues that buyers face, as well as then challenges and issues that sellers face. I would love to pick your brain today and bounce some ideas off you about brokerage in the FedEx line haul space. Is that cool with you?
Yeah, that's definitely a hot topic, it seems like these days. So let's tackle it.
There's been a lot of news for different reasons about a certain broker. We're not even going to go there. I just want to talk about brokerage in general because I have opinions on it. They may be wrong, they may be right, but they come from the fact that I have a real estate broker's license from a previous life, and they drill into us a lot of rules, a lot of ethics on the real estate side. And I look at the way brokerage works in the FedEx route space, and I don't feel like it's the same. Do you get that feeling?
I would agree with that. The real estate space is, you know what you're buying. It's a tangible. It is it's land. It's a building. It's something there you can see, you can touch. You get into this market and you're buying a couple different things. You could be buying trucks. You could be buying routes. Some people want to say the drivers are included. I always say that gets a little hazy, but it's the unknowns that you're buying, and more importantly, it's the problems, it's the issues that you're buying with it, and also a lot of times it's the opportunity is what you're purchasing. So the hard part in this space is really knowing what you're getting for your money.
So you just covered a lot of ground. I'm going to pick it apart step by step if I could.
Let's go.
Fair statement or not fair statement? Basically, a line haul purchase can be broken down into the value of the routes and the value of the equipment.
I would say that's fair.
Okay. As far as the routes go, well, let's start with the easier one. If you're buying trucks outright, if the seller owns them, that I would think is a fairly simple exercise of looking at what the resale value of those trucks with those miles and those makes and models is, right?
Exactly. I talked to some dealers, check out the papers, check out the listings. That's a simple, there's not a very good Kelley Blue Book equivalent for the tractor world, but definitely a lot of places out there you can get those numbers fairly quickly.
Okay. And in the specifics, you might say, well, this truck is selling over there for this. And you go, okay, but there's $4,000 worth of safety and camera equipment that you got to adjust for, right?
Right.
Okay. If someone's leasing their trucks and you're going to take over their leases, do you pay them for that?
Could be, depends on how the lease is set up. There could be some equity in the leases, but typically, no, there's not a transfer or anything. If there are some fees associated with that, you may have to pay that, but I haven't seen very many deals take place where you're actually paying for taking over the lease.
You probably would replace any security deposit on file to get
Correct.
the seller out.
Correct.
And if the seller doesn't transfer the leases, now they have trucks with no freight to carry, right?
Exactly.
So if anything, you might be doing the seller a bit of a solid by taking the leases.
Correct.
Okay. Now on the routes, lots of different ways to value this stuff. The one thing that I find infuriating, because it makes no sense to me, is everybody talks about how things are trading a multiple of gross revenue. Can you explain to me why a multiple of gross revenue makes sense?
I think the argument would be that no two businesses are operated the same. And so it truly, in some people's view, would not matter what one guy is doing, that a contractor is a contractor and you have your contract, you get paid a certain rate per mile. And every contractor gets paid that rate per mile. So the success of a contractor can be based upon his ability to control the expenses. And I think that's where a lot of people get into. Where that could mislead someone is that market to market expenses are not the same. So you're not always showing true apples to apples when you're only showing the gross revenue.
Because if you told me, hey, 3 different businesses have sold, each had $1 million worth of gross revenue and each traded for about $1 million. And then you said, it seems that things are trading 1 times gross revenue. Okay, that's an observation. But to flip it around and say, this business has $1 million revenue, it should trade 1 times gross revenue. I don't get that.
Fair argument.
Right. And if you think about the last 2-3 years or last 2 years and what's happened with fuel prices, okay. 2 years ago, a business that was doing X number of miles and had gross revenue of $1 million. And now it's doing exactly X number of miles like it was and paying its drivers the same thing and doing the same runs. Because of fuel costs, their gross revenue might be $1.3 million. Did the value of the business go up?
The rising fuel market and how quickly fuel costs rose over the past few years exploited that and made that a valid argument. Whereas in 2016 to 2020, when fuel was pretty stable, along for the most part, it was not as drastic in an increase of a price. It was more of a constant, and it was more balanced across the market, across all miles, and you didn't see the fluctuations to where you did see those 30% swings in a short period of time.
When you look at a business that you're thinking about buying, what's the key number you care about to understand what the thing's worth?
In all honesty, the biggest number I look at is the actual number of miles ran versus what the position should run.
Okay, so you're looking for a gap between actual and pro forma, basically?
Correct. I think a lot of people sell on the pro forma. A lot of people want to buy on the actual. And to me, the headache, the hardships of the business are closing that gap. So the closer, the smaller that gap, the more ease of operation you're walking into from day one. And that business, in my opinion, tends to turn and should be worth a higher multiple.
Well, it should be because actual is closer to pro forma, right?
Correct.
And so the actual gross revenue you didn't mention that in your number.
What was the actual gross revenue?
Yeah. Back to my point, this whole gross revenue, everybody's fixation with it. I didn't hear you mention that on the key number that you care about.
No, yeah.
Miles.
Mine's it's the miles. You could look at it the same way. You could say actual gross revenue versus pro forma gross revenue. But at that point, you're just taking fuel as a constant of today, or as a historical number over the last year. And again, to your point, with today's climate of fuel prices, you need to kind of throw fuel out the window and look at trip revenue.
Because I would make the argument that the thing that matters most is if you buy this business, how much cash is it going to put in your pocket each year?
Yep.
And it sounds like you're looking at miles, you're looking at pro forma and actual, and you're trying to guesstimate what the business should do. And I'm betting that in your mind, once you know how much miles, you got a back of the envelope way of saying that many miles should put this many dollars in my pocket.
Exactly. And I think that's what, we can do that, and I can do that because I've been in this business long enough. Someone coming in day one, it would be really nice to have that, and that be a true number that's represented with these businesses. And you don't often see that in the listings today.
Now, to be fair to the brokers out there, I have seen the financials that a lot of contractors have. if I was a broker representing them, I'd have a lot of difficulty trying to put together a good set of financials from what I'm given, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's why anybody we work with, anybody that I've talked to, and why we set it up ourselves this way is you got to be thinking about an exit from day one. And if you aren't aligning your business in a model that can lead to your exit, and maybe it's not a complete exit, but it's a carve out because you want to get rid of one section of your business or one domicile of your business to invest more funds in another area of the country. But if you think about your exit from day one, you can set your company up for success to be able to provide the numbers needed to give accurate data.
Sure. And I got asked by one contractor who had started a few months earlier, is it really worth me spending a few bucks every month to have my books in order? And I thought, I didn't just hear that question from someone who paid over $1 million for a business, did I? I swear to you, I'm not making this up. And I was like, yes, call Peggy Johnson. She'll do this for you. It's very straightforward. PS Business Solutions. Free plug, Peggy, because it's such a good story. And he did, and she did, and it's all better for minimal dollars. But at the same time, though, even though brokers might be given less than perfect information, a broker's going to want to put some lipstick on this thing, right? So broker gets given some numbers, and then they're going to want to adjust the lighting, if you will, to highlight the best stuff.
It seems that a lot of listings can be sold based on or prices may include some opportunity there, and there seems to be the lure, the appeal of the opportunity, the what's next with FedEx, the growth module. And there's some validity to that. You know, people can get into a new space, can get into a new market with 2 or 3, 4 or 5 runs. And then, you know, a year later, they've got 10 runs and their business is worth substantially more than what it was when they bought in. But it's hard to put a number on that, a true number on that.
What about you know, the old adage, never ask a barber if he thinks you need a haircut? I just feel like there's too many buyers out there asking brokers who are the seller's agent, who are getting paid by the seller to sell something, is this a good deal? And I know that it's not that naive, but at the same time, it is. People are trusting brokers when they say, this is where things are trading. This is what you can expect from a multiple, from an EBITDA number. This is what you can expect from a free cash flow number. You're asking people for information on that, and their key source of revenue is getting these things to sell for the highest price possible. That's nuts.
Yeah, it's interesting that in this space, unlike the real estate market, that there's nobody representing the buyers. There's no one on that side looking out for their best interest. It seems to be that there are only some major listing agents, and they do put out some of them put out a lot of information to try to educate buyers. But like you said, at the end of the day, most are making their profits and making their income based on the sellers.
I wouldn't say there's nobody. You've done it informally. I know of other contractors who have helped people informally. Rick Dunn is out there doing this for folks. So I think that that's changing, but there's nobody who's come up with a business model to help. Why is that?
Good question. I don't know if anybody's thought of it yet. I don't know if anybody's gone out there. I mean, we've done it, like you said, we've done it on a very small scale, which helps you guys out. And it's been, we're doing some of that right now. Actually, after the last video lead, I don't know if anybody's thought of there's a way to market it yet or a way to get it out there, if there's really a need for it. Obviously you see a need for it, so it could be there is, but it hasn't been called upon by the buyers yet. The buyers haven't demanded it. I think that's why it isn't out there.
Well, I see a need for it, but I'm the type of weirdo that if you say, hey, we're going to go on a trip to Australia, I'm going to go buy 2 books about Australia to learn about it before I do it, so I do it right. If you tell me that we're going to go invest in real estate for the first time, I went out and read 5 books on real estate investing before I actually dove in, and I talked to everybody I could. I believe in the value of education because my time invested can save me a ton of money. And I look at this space and I think people getting in are putting up hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars when you include loan commitments. And I don't feel like people are really investing the time or spending any money to educate themselves to prevent, mistakes. And in line haul, I don't think it's as bad, but in P&D, it's a disaster, in my opinion. A lot of people have stuck their necks out and gotten their heads lopped off because they haven't done the research.
Yeah, I can't speak to that side. In line haul, I feel like most time when you have guys getting in, it's they were buddies or they knew a contractor, they'd heard about it somewhere. They knew somebody that was doing it, and they did a little bit of research here and there, and then they feel they found what was a good deal and they jumped in. You hear that story often. I don't think there's a place for them to go right now. There's nothing to see. There's nothing out there for, hey, where do I go to get this education? Where do I go to get this training? And so, like you said, there's some contractors doing it on a small scale, but the platform just isn't there for people to know.
I want to fix that. I think it's a problem in the marketplace. If the real estate market had no way for buyers to be represented by smart people who've done this before, or had no resources for people to research before they buy something, the real estate market wouldn't work, right?
Agreed. I think you're already doing that to an extent, right? The Line Haul Summit, that was a great space of bringing a lot of people in together, and a lot of education happened. A lot of people learned, and more importantly, a lot of people networked at that space.
It was really gratifying to see people up their game and learn from each other and learn from vendors. I just don't think once a year is enough.
I would agree. I know that I network and I do try to get my face out there, but try to meet people and talk to people more than that. It's a continuous learning process for me and for our operations. If we aren't on the cutting edge, then we know we're falling behind.
Do you think that they're in the brokerage space that the business brokers should embrace what goes on in real estate, which is dual agency, where you represent both the buyer and seller, is a very special situation, and you have to be very ethically clean to do that properly?
Do I think that should happen? Absolutely. I don't see there's no one to hold anybody accountable to that in this that I see right now. I haven't seen any governing agency, anybody out there that demands that happens.
No, but buyers have the power to do that. They're the ones with the checkbook, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. They're the only ones that could make it happen immediately. Do they know how to right now?
Let's assume there's some buyers out there thinking about engaging with brokers, which is probably a good thing. They have listings, they have things to buy. What would you advise them as they engage with brokers to make sure they protect their interests properly?
Oh, I would tell them to dive into the real numbers. I would tell them to really look at the HR side of things, the driver turnover rates, the issues that don't always present themselves on a P&L that ultimately really can affect the bottom line. I think that is what often gets hidden in some listings is the headaches, right? Like you said, they want to put a lipstick on a pig, and numbers can look good, and you could have 7 dedicated runs. And, if you look at the year for a whole, yeah, you ran your miles for those 7 dedicated runs, but actually the guy was slip seating tractors, and, he was running 3 tractors during the day. And so he really wasn't running the 7 dedicated runs all year long. He just was supplementing miles elsewhere. It's an opportunity for the buyer but it's also an issue. It's also a problem. It's also can lead to some marketing expenses that maybe weren't there. You know, if you're really wanting to fill those seats and having to fill that PM position now, you have other costs associated with these runs. And so having someone with a trained eye that could look at that for a buyer would be huge, but I just don't see that in the space right now.
Well, I personally think that there's at least some brokers who are putting out some educational material for buyers. And there's no reason why buyers can't look at that information, digest it, learn from it, right? But the failure is when they stop there and they think that's the curriculum. I think that if they start asking around, hell, call me. I'll introduce them to people that'll help them with this stuff. I know some people who do it informally. I'll point them to you. See if you want to work with them for a fee. There's also some vendors in this space who know what's going on. Linehaul Central, Linehaul Solutions, DMG Go, they're all doing back office operations. They've all got smart people who know what a business like this should look like. They can help with this, I'm sure, for a fee if you approach them. There are absolutely, if you're thinking about getting into the space, go to the Linehaul Summit for sure, coming up in June, and any other opportunities to gather with other Linehaul folks. If you're listening to this and you're thinking about buying, please, please, please prepare yourself. Learn as much as you can, because there's so much that you could learn. And I'm not saying spend 10 years learning before you pull the trigger, but don't just listen to a broker and don't just watch their videos. Their business is making commissions to get the sellers the highest price. Go in eyes wide open and understand that. They do a good job of it. That's their job, right?
Absolutely. And it's, yeah, that's their job to make it look really pretty, and they can make them look really pretty on paper. And I think from a buyer side, it's your job to go through and peel that apart and figure out the obstacles and figure out, you know, the headaches and figure out the expenses that you're going to incur should you make this purchase. And doing that and diving into it, that's how you can really, you know, maximize your entry into the space to set yourself up for the success in the future.
It goes back to, forgive me, I cut you off. What were you saying?
Yeah, so that needs to be done. That needs to be out there. That needs to be more widespread. It would help the market as a whole if people were getting in at a successful number.
I think there's a lot of parallels to brokerage in this space. To imagine if you're a first-time car buyer going to a used car lot, there's something called information asymmetry. You as the buyer buying your first car and the used car salesman, one of those two people knows a hell of a lot more about the car in question than the other one, right? Mm-hmm. And yeah, shrugging and going, it is what it is, I hope I don't get a lemon, is a very expensive game to play.
Absolutely.
And it's really interesting to me that from what I understand, if someone purports to be a buyer's agent in the FedEx ground space and they approach a broker who's got a listing and say, I've got a buyer who's qualified, let's work together to get the deal done. I have never heard that any of the existing brokers in the space will offer to share their commission, which would be standard in real estate. I don't know why that's been allowed to stand, because as a seller, if you sign a listing agreement, and let's say the listing agreement says it's a 10% commission, I don't know what the rates are, everybody sets their own, and a buyer shows up with a buyer's agent who wants to get half that commission, if the selling agent won't share it, the buyer's agent is going to insist on getting paid by the buyer, which means now, let's say they wanted 5% of the deal, now the seller is actually giving up 15% because the buyer is going to reduce what they'll pay so they have money left over to pay their buyer's agent. So right. If you're a seller and you list and you don't get in the agreement, hey, if the other side has a buyer's agent, you have to split a commission, just like a standard real estate listing would do, you're really hurting yourself, because this means the buyers who actually are represented and qualified, they're not going to go to you, or they're going to pay a lot lower price because the buyer's agent has to get paid from someone.
Right.
And I'm not buying into this notion that buyer's agents may not have the licensing that seller's agents do, because in the business brokerage world, I don't think you really need a license. I certainly don't know of the existing business brokers in this space having licenses, even though some states require it. So it's not even a licensing thing. I just think it's the fact that they can get away with it and say, we're not doing that, and nobody else is willing to do it. I don't know why there's not competition amongst the sellers listing. It's weird to me.
I can't speak as intelligently to you as like you said, the requirements from state to state or anything like that with the requirements on that. That's not something I've delved into. Haven't really gone so far with the brokerage. We have bought and sold some runs over the years, and we have dealt with brokers on a couple of transactions, and we've done a lot of them FISBO. We have always been very thorough in our due diligence of any purchase we have made, and we haven't made very many. We've only purchased, I think, 2 sets of routes over the years, but we've helped some others do it, and we are very thorough in what we look into, and it comes at a cost, right? There's a lot of time involved, and I would almost argue that there's more time involved from the buyer side than there is from the seller side. But to your point, everything that we've been paid to do these from guys has been coming out of the buyer's pocket. The seller and their listing agents have not offered to provide funds for any of the services rendered from our end. And if you look at across markets, like you said, it should be that way.
Have you ever sold through a broker or tried to?
We attempted to one time, yes.
How much negotiability is there in a listing agreement?
On our relationship with them, there was no negotiating around. It was more of a take it or leave it deal.
You made it take it or leave it, or they did?
They did. Now we did not have a widely broadcasted listing. It was more of a pocket listing, and so I can understand some more defined circumstances being involved in those contracts, but it was a take it or leave it offer.
Because brokers, to my mind, offer a number of valuable things potentially if they do it right. They can disseminate a listing far and wide, right? They can also take a pocket listing and keep it quiet, so it's not public, but if buyers show up, they can whisper to them, hey, there's this thing available, right? They can help put together the due diligence material for you. They can put a marketing spin on that due diligence material. In theory, they can beard the sale. So if you were selling your business and you didn't want people to know it was for sale, you didn't want your drivers to know you were selling the business, the broker could, in theory, keep it quiet as to who the owner is in some way, right?
Correct.
A broker can also save you the time of having to take the phone calls from interested parties. And presumably a broker will help negotiate the deal, right?
Yep.
I have heard enough stories to wonder how well the brokers do all those things. I mean, look, this is not endemic to the brokers in this space. I can tell you in real estate, you think that if you're a seller, your broker is trying to get the highest price possible. It's true and it's not true. They're interested in trying to get a high price and get the deal done as quickly as possible to move on to the next one. That's the way a broker thinks, okay? Same with a buyer. Can I get this person to buy, get my commission, and move on to the next one? It's not necessarily the actual rock bottom price, because that may take a lot longer and risk losing the deal, right? So I get it. Brokers want to get the deal done. But the numbers that I hear tossed around that are being charged as commissions on these deals, I'm not seeing the value. Are you?
I think that it is oftentimes a very, very high number, and a lot of times I feel it is baked into the listing price. to an extent. I think a lot of these values we've seen have got to be taking in the assumption of what the broker is going to get paid. There's a lot of work that goes into creating a listing. We have sold runs, and we put together a package that shows the true numbers of the runs. If that information were out there, if it were a true number, if it were a true value add to the buyer of the routes, I could see getting a good size fee for your work. But there would be, in my opinion, a lot more work involved in producing those numbers and producing the data and producing a true buyer's package than what I've seen from the guys who are doing it today.
I like that idea. I like the idea of putting together that whole info packet. I like the notion that whenever you align incentives, I think business is better. And brokers, by their nature, are transactional, right? Let's get a deal done, and I don't ever want to hear from you unless you want to do another deal in the future, right?
Right.
I really like trying to craft something where, for buyers and or sellers, you are working hopefully to do business long-term together. And you want to make sure that every party comes out in a winning situation so that you're around to do repeat business in the future, right? And I guess if you're a seller, you don't really care because you're leaving the space if you're selling everything. But if you're selling part of your business, you should be acutely concerned with this because you're still going to be in the space and probably have to see the person you're selling to on a regular basis if it's in a market you're in, right?
Right.
But if you're a buyer, you're never going to hear from that broker again until you're ready to sell, right? Unless you want to buy again.
Unless you want to buy again. To me, what I'm looking for in a broker, or what I'm looking for in any vendor I'm dealing with, is efficiencies, right? I'm looking to make a process that I'm not an expert in simple for me, and make sure that I'm getting all added value that's out there. I think that's what brokers are trying to do for the sellers, right? They are trying to maximize their value, and they are trying to make the processes efficient. If there were someone out there doing the same for the buyers, we would be in that harmony, that world where this could work, and the deals could actually probably flow a whole lot smoother than what they do now. Oftentimes the deals get hung up because a buyer coming in just doesn't understand and doesn't really know what they're looking at, and deals can drag their feet, and the buyers aren't prepped for FedEx, right? If you have a new guy coming in, and you can think you have a deal done and have your purchase agreement, but then you go to submit the BDO 30 and he's not registered in the right states, and he's not this and he's not that, and all of a sudden your deal strings out 6 months. To me, the whole point of the brokers, or the whole point of those people, is to make the transaction efficient and to make things run smooth, and getting something out there to where you can do that on the buyer side, and bringing the buyers better prepped to the table and having them more informed from day one, it seems to be would make that transition smoother for both buyer and seller.
Yeah, I would think a buyer's agent, if such existed, would be educating folks before they got into it, helping them understand the ins and outs, the pros and cons. They'd be guiding them through FedEx approval. They'd be guiding them through lending approval. They'd get them qualified. They'd help them analyze these things. And once it's done, they'd either point them in the right direction or provide some coaching to make sure that when they stand up this new business, they're successful, right? Because if you're selling,
that's part of, we do, as we're speaking, it's, we do bits and pieces of this right now. We don't do the whole thing, but we do a lot of the FedEx training. We do a lot of the due diligence prep and the due diligence investigation of the routes. It's definitely an interesting concept, and one to be looking into.
This is going to seem like a cheap shot, but I've met a lot of people who have bought or sold through the existing brokers in this space. That's wonderful, right? I haven't met anybody who's done it again. And Look, they're probably out there. I'm not saying they don't exist, the regular customers, but I haven't met anybody said, yeah, I bought through so-and-so and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. I haven't met that person.
Maybe you'll have an email full of them now.
Yeah, look, we're going to put my email in there. If you're that person, I really would love to meet you. And because I might be doing a total disservice to the existing brokers, please, I'd love a great reference. I haven't run into one. And I want to understand this space because I feel like sometimes people buy and they feel like they got hoodwinked and they get involved in a lawsuit. And that's just terrific. The only person you're making rich at that point are the lawyers, right? People who buy and then sell at a loss and hate the space, which is a shame because it's actually a good space. You can make great money in this space. And there's great people in it. To come in and fail because you overpaid and the debt service is killing you and you have to get out, that's tragic. It shouldn't happen, right? Yes, obviously a seller, if you overpaid, is laughing all the way to the bank, and probably the broker is too, but that's not the way a healthy ecosystem should work. I used to work on Wall Street. That's imperfect information, right? With better information, it should be a more liquid market and things should trade at real fair value. And I don't think they are. I think there's been an elevation and some marketing spin, and it's felt very boiler room or timeshare salesy to me. And I don't like the fact that people look at the space I'm operating in with my software company trying to help people and they go, oh, there's a lot of BS in there. There's not. Well, there is in some cases, but it shouldn't be. And I want to fix that.
Well, and from my side of it, I don't like that either, because if anything, it's only decreased the value of my runs, right? I run a profitable operation. I want to see the maximum return off of my operation if and when I choose to exit the space. If there are a lot of misleading numbers and the space is not trusted or the routes are not trusted, it hurts everybody.
For sure. David, I've been on my soapbox blathering about some things here that are near and dear to my heart, but let me pause for a minute and ask you, what should I have mentioned about this that I haven't brought up?
Well, we've hit here, there, and everywhere. That's a tough one for me. I think one thing that we really need to focus and really need to pay attention to in this is when we're looking at runs. A lot of people currently are wanting to look at annual revenue and look at the past year. And I think we can all see that certain markets, if you pay attention, as we've mentioned on previous videos, right, you pay attention to the Facebook boards and you pay attention to the chat spaces, and certain markets are not performing recently as they did historically. So if you are a buyer out there and you are looking at some of these businesses and you're looking at getting in the space now, really take a look at the last 8 week settlements and see what the recent trend is and see what's going on today, and try to broadcast for the future, just to make sure that you are safe and you are hedged on your investment.
If folks are curious, we're recording this November 22nd, 2022, right before Thanksgiving, in case this gets dated because it'll be out on the internet. I'm going to say this, and this is not a dated comment. If you are looking to buy, looking to sell, thinking about brokers, I'm always available for an opinion, and I'm happy to open my Rolodex and point you to people who are doing stuff in this space who might be able to help you learn, educate yourself, think through it, that kind of thing. I'm also eager, this is the dated part, if anybody's got some ideas on what we could do to improve the ecosystem, improve what's out there, improve a way to align incentives for all the people involved, I am all ears, and I'm willing to spend my own money to start an initiative to try to fix this, because I think it's a problem that needs fixing. So if you've got ideas or suggestions or just want to kick around, please contact me. I would love to hear from you. That said, if you're doing a transaction and you're looking to get help, right there, David's a really smart guy, and I suspect if he's got bandwidth, he'd like to work with you. And if David can't work with you, I can think of a few other folks that probably would want to, and I'm happy to give you their names and numbers. I'm not going to put it on the video because I haven't asked them if that's okay.
Well, I appreciate the shout out there on that one. I'd definitely be willing to work with and talk with anybody. Like I said before, we always try to get to know our people and kind of know how they've gotten to where they're at and more importantly, where they're looking to go. And a lot of times investment is a key point of that. And so if anybody needs help and wants help looking to get into this space, reach out. I'm sure you'll be putting my contact number on here somewhere. John, everything you've been saying in this, it's kind of eye-opening, and it's interesting to hear another perspective and kind of a non-contractor perspective on this of what could be and should be in the space.
David, I'm going to wrap it there in the interest of time, but a million thanks for coming back and sharing your time and your wisdom on this. And I hope we can do another one soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Always open to it. Really, really appreciate the conversations with you.
And for you watching, thank you for taking the time. And we hope this is valuable, and we love all the feedback we can. If there's other things you want us to talk about, we want to hear from you. Thank you.